I said this at a church one time, and I've never been invited back, and I think this is why, and I'm at peace with it. But, we make fun of a generation that's on their phone all the time, and we gave them the phone.
Exactly
we'll be like,
exactly right.
Man, that generation, they just want participation trophies. They've had one their whole life. And I'm like, you're so right. I love my participation trophy. Thank you for giving it to me.
You gave it to me, yeah. Hey, how you doing? Welcome back. It's been a while. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Right, okay. Welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Elephants podcast. Normally, Jeff Wallace, Pastor Jeff Wallace, PhD, Dr. Wallace, and I have a little conversation. Today, I have the incredible privilege of having a friend, a gentleman I've been getting to know for the last year and a half or so, Pastor Luke Lezon. Man, thanks for hanging out with me.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I'm not a PhD, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not Jeff Wallace, but I'll do my best.
Well, you know what? The PhD is just an excuse to be able to talk however you want to talk, dress however you want to talk, and then just be like, yeah, man, I got a doctorate. What are you going to say? So you pastor here in Orlando, Florida,
yes,
first
sir.
of all. So I'm a homer right now. I'm just being a homer, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm a fan because of who you are, what you do, your leadership. But I love the fact that it's here.
Yeah.
So you and I'm a little bit older than you. Mm-hmm. So I've been in this city a long time.
Yeah.
And I want to say as we even get started in this conversation, I am personally grateful for you. And there's a lot of us, we didn't know your name, but we've been praying for somebody like you to be in this city. And here's why I'm saying this, ladies and gentlemen, because we love our city, Orlando, the city beautiful. And we're known for tourism. We got the second biggest field in our city is the medical community.
Yeah.
But just down the road is the largest one of the largest universities in the country. UCF, University of Central Florida, is the third largest campus in the country.
Yeah.
And yet, and if you're listening to this and you're in the Orlando area and you go, but I have a college ministry, I'm not throwing shade on you. There have been a lot of people who have tried, and some people have done a good job, but there has not been an epicenter for students who are either believing students or spiritually seeking, to go, that's a place I want to be. And somehow the Lord's just anointed and ordained you for such a time as this, and you're doing that in our city.
Man, thanks. No, I mean, it's an honor. I mean, the fact that it's happening is kind of crazy, but there's great, to your point too, man, great college ministries in the city. And so thankful for them. It's been real incredible to watch God move just like a simple yes. I mean, to come down and say, hey, we'll go to that crazy city and try to reach young people there, because it's more than just UCF. I mean, it's like Valencia and
Rollins,
Disney College program and Rollins and just in general young people that are flocking to the city. So it's been a journey, man. It's awesome.
It's a younger city too.
Yeah.
Not to get too technical, but it's getting younger because Disney has changed the game a little bit. Like in their effort to make more money, and they're a business, they got to make money, but they go, okay, we're not going to have as many full-time employees. Yeah. So that means you don't have to pay people with benefits. Well, people who receive benefits are people who are adulting a little later on in the journey. So what's happening is we're actually in this moment seeing the demographic shift even younger, because the only people that can work 30 hours a week and still live and don't have families are younger people. So what's crazy is this city's even more younger. All right, let's talk a little bit. Like, tell me your backstory, man. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm from Dallas, Texas, North Dallas, Flower Mound area specifically. I wasn't born there, but I was raised there, and so it's home. Kind of a mutt. I've lived all over the country. My dad was working in consumer electronics at the height of consumer electronics being a big deal. So Sony, Vizio, Samsung, all of it. And so did most of my time in Dallas. Graduated from Flower Mound High School and went to Texas A&M.
Are you a fan? Are you an Aggie? No, you're not. You're a Tennessee guy, aren't you?
I'm a Tennessee guy.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you said it, so now I got to talk about it, Brent. But
sorry.
No, but so I love A&M, but I grew up. My dad was a volunteer.
Okay, there it is.
And so it like wasn't an option. Like, so I mean, bleed orange, and like went to A&M and love it, but there's something like. That's my dad and I, man.
Yeah.
Like it's Tennessee or die for me. But I mean, A&M was amazing, and I was there. Like Johnny Football was there, and like it was craziness. It was
now
so
they're making
fun.
documentaries about that guy.
Yeah, and they should have made it longer, but it was awesome. And so yeah, I love A&M, and my life really was changed at Texas A&M. I mean, I was a believer. My parents raised me in the church. Loved it. I mean, I was what I would say is like a somewhat disenchanted believer. I was like, I really do believe that Jesus died for my sins, rose from the grave, all the things. He's the Son of God. But I just like, I'm not gonna make this like a huge piece of my life as far as the church goes. Like I just, it seems boring. I got to Texas A&M and Breakaway, which I would imagine you're familiar with.
Very familiar, yeah.
I went to Breakaway, and it was like my eyes opened.
For anybody that doesn't know, what is Breakaway?
Breakaway is the largest on-campus ministry in the world, I think is correct. I think that's accurate. I mean,
so.
My first experience with Breakaway was I walked into the basketball arena, Reed Arena, and there were 14,000 kids there, 12,000 kids, whatever it holds, worshiping the Lord. And what's crazy is, I grew up in the church, but I was just kind of like, oh, this is normal. And since everything subsequent, you're like, this was not normal. And not only was the experience not normal of having that many like-minded people worshiping the Lord, to sit under who thankfully now is like a friend, but at the time and still is a hero to me in so many ways. So to sit under Ben Stewart's teaching.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. That was when Ben was the campus pastor.
Was
there.
Pretty surreal. He'll tell a story sometimes. I've heard him tell the story a couple times where he sat in the back of a room and listened to a guy unpack scripture in a way that just made him weep, where he understood God. I was sitting up in the rafters of Reed Arena, and I understood for the first time that God is not just like intellectually appealing to me in my mind, and he's not just emotionally appealing to my heart, but he's appealing to my whole self. And through Ben's teaching, I realized like it reaffirmed everything I knew to be true, but I was just like, my mind was unlocked to the beauty of Scripture. And I was like, I've just got to devour this. Felt called to ministry there. It was incredible. And then
he's incredible. Like if people don't know who Ben Stewart is, he was at Breakaway for many years, but now he's part of Passion Church, and he heads up Passion DC, Passion City Church DC.
I think he's got to be the best Bible teacher under 50 in the country.
He's kind of now I don't know Ben, but I've listened to him for years.
Yeah.
I go, you can't be this guy and not be a nerd.
Like, he would say that, I think.
He's got to be a book. He's the guy that reads the footnotes in a book. I mean,
I heard Ben once give a whole sermon on I think it was the back of like the end of 2 Timothy or 1 Timothy or something, or wherever Paul is saying, and I'm not the best with addresses as a pastor, hello, but it's bring me my parchment, Timothy, and bring the cloak, and bring, and he did a whole sermon on that, and people are getting saved, and I was like, this is stupid. Just unbelievable. He's just a wizard. I mean, when it comes to this stuff. So brilliant guy. And
there's guys I listen to this way. I kind of break it up in my head. There's guys I'll listen to, I'll listen to a podcast in a car ride. I'll listen to a sermon. But then there's guys that I won't listen to in a car ride because I need to be sitting and I need to be able to take notes when they talk. And he's one of those pastors. Yeah.
Well, and there was something appealing about, and it was kind of at the time too, where being a pastor, it almost felt like you not only need to be a theologian, but maybe you need to be cool. And I'm not cool. I wear all blacks, pretty standard. You know what I mean? I was just I just feel very in this book, and that's what I care about, and you understanding God, and he just was that, and just made it beautiful. And so to be unlocked to that, I was I feel called to ministry, and I didn't even feel called to preach. I was just whatever that feeling is, whatever that is, I want to be a part of whatever makes people feel that. And so I ended up getting engaged the last year of college. My wife, we met over Twitter. It's a real millennial love story. And
did you that's real? You met over Twitter?
Yeah, no, and I don't even have Twitter anymore. But I was just I got what I came here for, and now I'm ready to be done with this.
That's it, man.
I'm this is a very divisive place, but
Not too divisive.
Not too divisive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And but now, now Twitter's called X.
Yeah.
So my favorite thing is to tell people I met my wife on X. And
it depends on what generation you are, what that means.
Yeah,
Some people will
100%.
go, that could mean like.
But it's questionable, and that's what's funny.
It's questionable.
So,
see, my generation, like we were in the parking lot doing X.
Right.
So
right.
It was,
yeah.
It was right behind. Like it was like we were X. For my generation, it was a drug, man.
But that's
we called it Mary Jane. We called it. Yeah.
So we're on the same wavelength then.
Okay.
It's just like, wow. Okay. Like, so, and the Lord got a hold of you guys, and I'm like, yeah. So, but yeah, we ended up getting engaged, and marriage counseling for us very quickly turned into a church planning conversation with the guy who was doing our marriage counseling.
Wow.
So we planted a church in Northwest Arkansas called Hill City. Church is still going. We did that for 2 years. I was the everything pastor. I would preach sometimes. I would do the janitorial work, youth stuff, young adult stuff. And then I ended up moving over to Atlanta, just speaking at a lot of different things over there. We were like, this is a good hub to be in. Wrote a book.
What was the name of the book?
Your Mess Matters. And so I was traveling and speaking and doing some things around that for a moment, helping lead a young adult ministry there that was a parachurch ministry.
Would you say at that time kind of helped sharpen your ability as a communicator? Because sometimes when you're the church planner, and I've been part of 2 church plants, and it's like there's not a lot of time to really concentrate on a specific skill set because you're.
Yeah, I think it definitely did. And one of the beautiful things too is I don't know why, like evangelists will often they will take 4 messages and preach them all over, and I don't know what it is. I've never even talked about this. I've never understood it, but I had like this weird conviction to just write something different anywhere I went, and just like the process of doing it was super refining for me. And so repetition. And, the ministry that I was leading in Atlanta, it just flamed out. And that was humbling. We weren't connected to a church. Leadership was just like all over the place. It was just, and I kind of went in there, to be honest with you, thinking like, we're just going to take over this city and here we go, plant our flag. And God was like, no. And, it was very humbling, very, very humbling. And I needed it. I think my wife needed a husband that needed it. And so God just, he ripped everything away from me. Like I was writing a book, but I didn't have, it was the most miserable I've ever been, was writing that book. And I'm writing a book called Your Mess Matters as in a place of misery. And it was tough. It was really tough. And so I literally would wake up. I had like kind of like a job part-time here and there and was doing some ministry things, but mostly I would wake up and have unlimited amounts of time to do whatever I wanted, which sounds really good and it's not. And so I would just read scripture for hours on end, weep, sob, freak out, mad at God, and just write some messages that I didn't have anywhere to preach them. I just would write them, hoping in faith that it would come back again. Wasn't sure God would ever use it. And then the world shut down. And I had just spoken at, this is how I got to Orlando. I had just spoken before the world shut down at a D Now in Georgia. And I had forgotten that I had it booked. The guy asked me to do a podcast beforehand, did it like via Zoom. And the guy leading worship there was Justin Melton, who's our worship pastor now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I go there, and no joke, dude, it was like the most memorable experience ever because I preach the D Now, and then, they'll have you preach on a Sunday. I'm sitting there on the front row, like with my wife about to go preach, and I look over at Lindsay, and I say, Lindsay, there's this guy, his like tie is undone. Looks like he's sweating, and he's holding something. And I was like, Lindsay, there's a guy holding a Miller Lite and a koozie on the front row.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
I said, Lindsay, there's a man with a beer bottle.
If he's sweating, he's been throwing them back for a while now.
He had a tough night.
This was a continuation of the night before.
So, and this is like, it would have been memorable enough that like my connection with my worship pastor now is what got me here. But some guys came to like escort him out, and like poor guy, I mean, like they went to bring him out, and he threw the beer bottle. It shattered into a million pieces on the floor. And I was like, well,
there you go.
Hey everybody, it's nice to be here. And so we launched into that, and then Justin just stayed in touch with me over the course of the coming months, even as the world shut down, and we ended up being asked to come down here and lead a young adult ministry. We did that, and now I'm the lead pastor.
Now you're the lead pastor.
I'm the lead pastor.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
It's amazing, buddy. The Life Bridge Church, but the college ministry is key.
Yep.
Which is spelled Quay.
Yeah, just to be difficult.
Just to be difficult.
I'm like not the most millennial. That's as millennial as I get, though. I was like, let's just be difficult, just because we can.
But it's amazing. The intentionality. What I love about it is if there is a bit of an ancient faith vibe in there, but then there's a lot of intentionality to atmospherics and architecture and the scope and sequence, and it really does feel. And I'm not awesome at it, but I try to do this with our programming.
Yeah.
Like I want there to feel like there's a full story arc. Like
you do that so well.
Beginning and middle, and you guys just do that really well. And I think that's become incredibly appealing to young adults and college students.
Yeah.
In our city. So you've been a pastor for 5 minutes then?
Yeah.
It feels like probably.
Yeah.
And then it also
500
some days
years.
it feels 500 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say? Do you love being a pastor?
Yeah, I do. There's things that you have to do that are work, as far as things that you did not get into ministry for. It's like, what's the HR protocol here? Like that kind of a thing. And just some aspects of leading a ministry that has real dollars and cents coming through. All that stuff that you did not get into it for. And I think it's actually good. It's a good reminder to be like, I did not get into this for this. And so it keeps the main thing. But I love it. I don't feel like I work really. I work hard, but I don't really feel like I work. I love preaching and teaching God's word. I love interacting with people. I love dealing with their struggles with them and walking with them. And so it's the best job in the world.
Most people don't know some of those. The reason I asked that question is because I knew you'd answer it that way. Most people don't realize there's some scars pastors have. There's some battles they fight that no one will ever see and will never really appreciate. And anyways, I wanted just to mention that because whoever we are. And I know right now we're in a weird place where there's some people who are very unhealthy that have done a lot of negative things with the pulpit and with the role of pastor.
Yeah.
It's caused a massive amount of distrust. So I would just simply say, guys, pray for your pastor. Like, pray that they'll be healthy personally. Pray that they'll be able to focus on what God has called them to do, and pray that he is able to shepherd that body.
I mean, that's how I got into this role. It's like no secret in Orlando.
Yep.
I actually think it might be the most well-known thing about our church up until recently is that, I took over a split, like the nastiest split that
Nobody
you can
wants
imagine.
that, by the way, to be their first pastorate either.
No, and so, I always wrestle with like, man, would I have rather like planted a church than, and so there's pros and cons, but yeah, we had more people in our young adult ministry than at our church for a long time.
Yeah.
And so, scars are how I got here.
Yeah.
And, that doesn't make me a martyr. But it definitely is brutal. And so, definitely want to encourage anybody.
But it gives you also wisdom beyond your years, Luke.
Yeah.
It allows you to grow in the ability to discern, think critically. Like, you can already think creatively, but it allows you to, it softens some things in you that need to be softened, but it also kind of gives you a little bit more grit about the convictions that are your core convictions.
No
and
doubt.
Then it helps to really solidify your philosophy of ministry as well. And so those things are vitally important. I've been through a few of those seasons, and I don't want them, but after they're done, I'm grateful for them.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a question just out of selfishness right now.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll talk about culture, next generation, all stuff.
Yeah.
But you do. I love how you do sermon series.
Oh yeah.
And so, they're not overly complicated. Like, some people are like so trying to be creative that you go, I need a decoder ring just to understand the title. You don't do that, but yet it's highly creative, and it's this weird, beautiful blend of hyper practicality with inspiration, very solid biblically. So how do you come up with sermon series?
Yeah, I'm I don't have any like special way of doing it. I mean, I devour scripture, and reading in general. And I feel like you do too. And I mean, I appreciate that. And so I really am just like, hey, I try to think in like 6-month chunks and be like, what are things that we can do in a way that is going to really build up faith as a church, and not just in individuals, but as a church body moving forward together. And so we have a rhythm where we'll do just kind of, I hate this is kind of a charge for it, but like a topical thing. And then we'll do like a book study or a very specific isolated study of something in the scriptures. And so like right now we're in Romans 8 in a collection that we're calling the Crown Jewel. And so we'll go through that, but then at the same time we'll go through something on like anxiety or whatever it might be.
Well, I remember you did that recently. You did that series recently, and it was like, I just think it's creative. So you spend a lot of time. You come up with kind of the core idea. Do you bring a team in to kind of flesh some of that out?
Yeah, I have a couple other guys that are on my teaching team now that I didn't have, but I'll really walk my ideas through with them just to refine it. And so I'll let them speak into it too. I mean, because they're at some point going to speak in the middle of that collection. And so, and those are the guys that I'll usually do that with. I mean, Justin Hill, who's my youth guy, and he's incredible. Tevin Lukas, who's my young adults guy, and he's incredible. And then I'll ask a couple of people that are outside of where we are and our immediate staff, just to give some feedback on it.
Let's talk a little bit about culture. Because I love the culture that you've built at LifeBridge, that the Lord's used you to build. What it's I almost want to say it's the $1 million question for a lot of people, but it is. Most people lose when it comes. Most leaders lose if they're going to lose at something. Usually, it's not some big moral failure. That does happen.
Yeah.
Usually, it's not. I'm not administrative enough, or I'm not this enough. I'm not organized. Usually, it's they lose because they can't build culture.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that? How would you define? Let's start with this. How would you define culture?
Oh, that's actually a very good question.
I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. My favorite definition, because I knew I just threw one at you.
No,
my
great.
favorite definition of culture comes from the indigenous people. And they define culture as it is shared memory.
Oh.
So that idea of going, okay, so to turn that into a question, how do we create healthy, positive, shared memory? What are we building? What will the memory be? What will it be built around? Because people think in terms of image and story. So all memories revolve around image and story. So how do we create shared memory and through that lens? But and what we're talking about is so vitally important. If you don't have culture right, you're not going to have healthy community. So.
No, I mean, and just to kind of like steal from that language, I guess I wouldn't say for us it's shared memory as much as it's shared story. Like, what's the story that God's telling through this place? Yeah. And so there's been a lot of different stories that have been told through our church, but now we're trying to be like, hey, what are the like the pillars that hold us up on a cultural level? Obviously, it's like scripture, spirit, all that stuff, like theologically, but specifically around culture, like we had a culture when I took it over, and we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, for the record, but it was a culture of cynicism, and I was like, we got to flip this. It's got to be a culture of celebration, and so I'm honest to a fault. And so I'm like, let's just tackle the difficulties head on. So I mean, my first staff meeting, I just gathered the team together, and I was like, hey, that's the other thing. I don't refer to anybody in a way that I feel like is going to make them feel subservient. Like, I mean, I'll say staff to us here, as people that have a staff team that we look after, but I always call them team. You're my team, and I'm your team. That you're not my staff. And so just trying to create like a culture of like ownership in that, but gather them together, and so we got a culture of cynicism. We got a lot of, and I'd list out the things that I don't like, because it's very difficult for people to deal with something that can't be diagnosed. And so I'm like, we've always done it this way, and those types of statements. And so I was like, we need to change this to a culture of celebration. And so I will add my own flavor of things that have spoken to me. I oftentimes am like, if God is speaking to me through this thing, then I imagine he will speak to other people as well. So I'm like, I love reading. I love films. The Count of Monte Cristo. Oh yeah. Super, super great. And obviously Count Mondego. and Edmond Dantes like have this like they're tight and they're not tight and they're friends and they're foes. And at the beginning of the film, if you want to just go to the film for a visual, they have like a king chess piece. And so I walked up at our first team meeting and I said, hey, this chess piece, it's a king chess piece. This is the story. They would throw it to each other and say, hey, you're king of the moment, right? You're taking on the new ship or whatever it might be. And so, and they would say, you're king of the moment. And so I took it and I said, I'm going to give 2 of these out every week and give them to one of you. And so I just spoke life and truth in what I saw out of an individual who did not expect it at all. And just said, this is what I see in you. And this is why I'm thankful that you're on our team. And I gave it to her, and then I gave it to somebody else. And I said, it's your job next week to stand up here and tell us why you're giving it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so just not to use the word forcing, but highly encouraging that you own something, that you have to think differently about it, that we're all going to look to you in a moment and say, what did you see in us? And so it's just those little things that it's like, I'm going to speak to the problem, I'm going to provide the solution, and I'm going to set the example, have been a way that we've kind of been able to see that change a little bit. We're still in the process of changing. I've been doing it 2 years, but we're getting there slowly but surely.
Well, it sounds like it's a game of inception, and that idea of going, I'm gonna plan an idea, and as it takes root, you're gonna go, no, I own that idea.
Yeah.
And that's not manipulation. I think that's just good leadership. Yeah. There's 3 things, as I'm trying to codify this in my head, listening to you go, okay, the first step that I'm hearing you say is before you ever try to build culture, you got to be able to critique what actually is in the moment, the existing culture.
Yeah.
And yours, you said ours was a culture of cynicism, but you need to shift that to celebration. So there was that, but then there was, just because you discover that doesn't mean everybody else is on board with that.
Not at all.
Usually cynical people don't know they're cynical.
No.
And don't really look in the mirror on that a lot. So then there's the second stage I think I'm hearing is clarity. Like, hey guys, here's what is.
Yeah.
You're framing reality for them. And then the third idea that I'm hearing, which really comes about with that kind of here, you're the king of the moment, that visual, which I think is so important. The actual like tangible thing that helps solidify that memory is so vitally important. And so but that third idea is creativity. And so I how would you see, did that shift quickly? Is that something that takes time? Is that
we're still shifting it?
Yeah.
And I think, and that's what I would encourage people with too, because I think it's so hard, man. Like you just hear people, it's like, man, so you did that, and then it was like euphoria, it's like, no, we still are trying to implement with that. Even though you provide the visual, you do all that stuff, it's like we're still trying to tweak little things that I think will have big results. I think like a big one, and I shared this today a little bit, is I asked everybody, do you have a culture of criticism or feedback? Those sound like the same things, and they're not entirely. But it can be hard to define the difference. It's focusing on weaknesses versus building up on people's strengths. And so does that mean everybody stays? No. Some people don't want to be critiqued. They don't want feedback. They don't want anything. And I'm just like, that's awesome. You're not a fit on the team.
Some people aren't going to look in the mirror.
No. And I think like you've got to have the humility to be like, I got to change this. And so it's just trying to be self-deprecating, but then also just honestly looking at yourself in front of other people and being like, I want you to watch me bleed, so that if you feel like you're bleeding as a result of some of the things that are happening here, like this is like somewhat normal. Like we're trying to change. We're trying to have a blood transfusion around here to make this thing tick a little differently. And so it's not quick, but very few things that are great are.
It's not quick, but it does sound like it is contagious.
It is. That's good.
Celebration is a very contagious energy in a room. Can be contagious, positive or negative. And so a spirit of celebration is a.
But you know what's weird about that is like I've been doing the King chess piece with my team for a year. Like the first, 6 weeks was like amazing. And then it's like you get so familiar, like you kind of lose your fervency. And so, but it was interesting. we took our volunteers. I changed names for everything because it just reframes. They're not volunteers. That sounds horrific. They're stewards. You're stewarding your time, treasure, talent, resources, all of those things for
They're
the
not
kingdom.
door holders.
Not door holders. And so we were like, hey, you're stewards. And so we did like this this night where we changed the name and let people know whatever. And so what we did is I had all of our team members stand up in front of our 300 now stewards, and they had king chess pieces and they had to throw it to somebody on their teams that's just like someone who attends our church. So people who had no idea that this was going to happen. And it was like the most, they would say why they were giving it to this person. Then they would name the person came up, and the whole church flipped out like, yes, we love that person. And then the next Monday morning when we had our next team meeting, it was like it was the first time we'd ever done it again, right? It's just like you just got to be able to see it for other people. And so it comes back around, it ebbs and it flows, but it's working.
You're refreshing the vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's another aspect of culture. We jumped through one you mentioned, and that is you were transparent, but another way of saying it is you were modeling the change you want to see.
Yeah.
And so you modeled the change you want to see, which might be kind of a fourth character step, if you will, for shifting culture or creating culture. But then this refreshing the vision, because you're right, things get old quick for people that hear them a lot.
Right.
And the reality is, like I tell our team this all the time, I know you do too, is like, guys, if we're tired of it, they're just starting to get it.
Yes.
And so but you got to keep it fresh with everybody, and so that can be a challenge. Yeah. So I actually will bring in stories of people, like a student that's
good.
Just a video or so, but I want them to hear what they're kind of getting, like, okay, I've heard that 1,000 times. I want them to hear that how that's changing somebody's life.
Amazing.
What do you hope for? I mean, like, what do you hope for? What are you looking for? What do you go, okay, man, in 5 years, if I could just whiteboard this out for the glory of God, what would LifeBridge Church be or do if it knew it wouldn't fail? What would the answer to that question be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a discipleship making and sending church. I think we are, by the absolute grace of God, experiencing like the expansion of width, and it's just like, man, we're growing, and so I say to our team, and if you brought any of them in here right now, they would say this is the most annoying thing that I just routinely am plugging more than anything else into their minds. I'm not trying to build a big church. If God makes it big, that's awesome. I'm trying to build a healthy church. And I think some of that's in response to what we've seen. But I'm just like, hey, everybody is, it's easy to like book someone or get excited about someone that's built something huge in scale. But I'm no longer interested in things that are huge. I'm interested in things that have lasted. And so we're trying to root people. And so identifying our best leaders, I would love to feel like I've got to get kicked out of my job early, because there's some kid that's right now 14 that's just so gifted, just like God's given him unbelievable insight into the scriptures. He's eager, he wants to learn, whatever that looks like. And it's like, I gotta find another job, like I gotta hand this over. So identifying those people and raising them up, that can be great disciples who make great disciples, that would be the most exciting thing to me, that are reaching our city and beyond. I mean, ultimately you ask for 5 years, but I think in 15 or 20 years I would love to be, I mean, we are just sending out local missionaries that plant churches, and we have enough funding, God willing, in our area. I mean, if you've been to Windermere, there's money there.
There's some capital in them hills.
There is, and my thing is, and we're not feeling that all the way or anything like that. But I think at some point when people see the vision, and you have people giving to our church and that are bought in because we are a funnel for that resource into kingdom work, that would be a dream. And I don't quote me on this, but everybody's like, you want to plant a campus, you want to do this, and I'm like, maybe for a minute, but at some point I want those to be autonomous things that we install great leaders. I just don't think my ego's too big to plant like a bunch of that Luke runs that church. Luke's got churches all over the world.
Mothership, and then
it's just like I just know me well enough. It's like could do it for a time, knowing that the plan is to not do that if that were needed. But I would love to just be like, we're sending not just resources, but people to go do whatever I feel like God put in their heart to do.
Yeah.
So
I tell you, I often, these are pastor conversations, like church philosophy and planning and what do you do and simulcasting and all this stuff. I think there's room in the conversation for all of it.
Oh, no,
and I think
no doubt.
the Lord uses a variety of methodologies. But I'm with you. I am most comfortable with, and I say this, and if you're out there and I come to your church, and a lot of the churches I go to are multi-site.
Yeah.
I'm piped into another campus. I'm very aware of that.
Which is awesome.
I'm grateful for it. But I'm most comfortable with what I guess what I would say it this way. I'm more prone to celebrate, like, that's a church standing on its own 2 feet, deeply rooted, as the Bible teaches us, and abounding in thanksgiving. And so, to me, that's the moment of celebration. It's like it's here. It's autonomous, not in the sense that it's self-sufficient, divorced from all the power of God. No, it's self-sufficient in that it is a church that is a functioning body caring for itself.
Yes.
And that's, so I don't know, that to me, that's the dream too.
And I mean, our church motto is take the risk. And I want to, dude, someone took the risk on me. I mean, Matt Slaughter, when he said, do you need a job in the middle of, marriage counseling or premarital counseling? I was like, yeah. And the first time he asked me to preach, I was like, I was like, I don't know that I need to do that. And he's like, no, I'm like, you're going to do it. And it's just like someone like called stuff out of me. Like, I just want to do that and just be like, man, let's get some of these people out there that like have that gifting. It's like, I don't want to stifle that. I'd rather get out of the way.
But here's the crazy thing. It makes so much sense to hear you say that, Luke. But I don't want to sound old because I'm not. But I've been in ministry long enough to know most places there's not the freedom to think that way. Yeah. Like, and even sometimes when it's said, it's not really meant.
And that's the thing. So what I was going to follow up and say on it, though, is I'm saying stuff that we've heard other people say. The way you'll know if it's true or not is if I plant 2 more campuses, and if in 7 years from the time they're planted, they're still, they have our church name, and you're like, hey, Luke, do you remember that podcast we did? You didn't really mean that, did you? So like, it's like having accountability that's going to keep your feet to the fire on that too.
Yeah, I feel, because I counsel a lot of guys that I just go, man, they want to be able to say to their pastor, like, I think God's doing this in me, but they know the minute they do, they're done. Yeah. It's like, oh, cool, well, let's get you out the door in the next 2 weeks. It's like, I don't know. I just need to know what's happening. I was hoping for some wise counsel, and no, it's not. I remember Francis Chan said years ago, he's spoken, Luke's speaking this week at Youth Pastor Summit, so if you hear some craziness in the background, that's just next gen leaders doing their thing. Francis, great pastor, has spoken many times at this conference, but I interviewed him for a project we were doing, and I asked him about staffing. And he said, Brent, I have to say on the regular, because I don't want them to think I don't mean it. Like, if you come to me and you say, I think God is leading me, I will not fire you, or I will not phase you out quickly. We will walk alongside you, help you figure out whatever that is. We'll do whatever we can to resource you, and then we'll celebrate you. Yeah. And I don't know. I know it sounds so simple, but it's rare. No, it's like a rare thing.
Yeah. I mean, I say, I don't, nobody felt called into ministry because of me. I hope, that'd be a really bad. So I'm like, we hold everybody. There are a couple people, man, like, of course you have time, like, man, this person's going to be riding with me forever. And like, we're going to, and it's not that they do anything wrong. it's that God leads them elsewhere. Yeah. And it's like, that's okay. Like, I don't own anybody. Yeah. Like, they don't own me. Like, I mean, and if God leads them somewhere else, that's great. So, and that's part of creating a great culture too, by the way. Amen. It's just being like, I could tell my pastor anything and I would feel supported in doing the thing that was within the bounds of Scripture and is being guided by the Spirit, not sinning, but I feel supported in that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing.
Let's take just a couple minutes to talk about about kind of next gen ministries, because a lot of people create a podcast because they want a voice. We have a voice. We have a podcast because it's just a way for us to continue conversation with thousands of SLU alumni that are out there. Many of them are serving in either volunteering or they're leading next gen ministries, and there's real challenges. Like as soon as you get a little older, you get a little bit more disconnected. And it's kind of hard to go, okay, so what does it mean to contextualize and understand and meet people where they're at? What would you say? Let me ask it this way: what is your top concern, or one of your top concerns, for how people approach next gen ministry? Maybe another way of saying it is, how do you guarantee failure?
Yeah, to speak to them like they are failures. Everybody believes that God's like sovereign and powerful until the next generation starts coming up, and then all of a sudden they're the ones that are just he was able to do whatever he wanted to right up until these guys started assuming the position of leaders in all sorts of spheres of influence, and so guaranteed failure. To start treating people, a generation like that, to speak to them in a way to where you just kind of have these grand sweeping generalizations rather than having a specialization in what makes them different. And so, I think right now, and you've seen it probably for about a decade now, where it's like we'll just superimpose like a cultural problem as a generational problem. So I'm not kidding you. I said this at a church one time, and I've never been invited back, and I think this is why, and I'm at peace with it. But we make fun of a generation that's on their phone all the time, and we gave them the phone. I mean, we'll be like,
exactly right,
man. That generation, they just want participation trophies. They've had one their whole life, and I'm like, you're so right. I love my participation trophy. Thank you for giving it to me.
You gave it to me, yeah.
Like it's just so it's like. Is it my fault or your fault that we live at a time where the iPhone came out? No. Do I want to have an atlas when I'm trying to get somewhere? No. But so it's nobody's fault, but it is our problem to like navigate together. And so it's like, do you have like a unified approach to the way that we're going to tackle this thing or not? You're just looking at me like your generation was nailing it all and we're just totally missing it. That's a surefire way to lose.
I'm going to tell you something I did that I had to ask the Lord to forgive me of, because I have a lot of young pastors I get to hang out with, and they'll call me and ask different questions. And I had a guy call me, and he was probably 28, and he went and he used the word burnout. And he's 28, Luke. Now I'm sitting here going, and in my head I'm trying to keep the tone right, keep the, whatever pastoral words you need to say, and I got off the phone. I'm like, what the heck's that guy talking about? Burnout. He hadn't been along long enough to have burnout. And there's a guy named Jonathan Haidt he's the one who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind.
Oh yeah.
Well, his follow-up just came out, The Anxious Generation.
No way.
Yeah, just this last month. So
praise God.
The Coddling of the American Mind. Jonathan Haidt, for those who don't know, is a sociologist. He's an academic. Now, he's not a conservative Christian. He's a liberal Jew. And he would tell you that. Like that's his. He's voted Democrat his whole life. He would call himself politically homeless right now. He's brilliant. He's the guy who's doing the research, and everybody recognizes that there is a challenge with this stuff. But what he would say is everything we suspected in the Calling of the American Mind, we now know to be true, and that's what the anxious generation is. It's the valid data, that the findings that have come about, and so he, I found him to be very helpful, and I was listening to some of what he was sharing from the research that they had done, and it really convicted me because I'm going, the reason that this young man at 28 has seen more than I have at 46 because of the technologies that are with it.
Yeah.
So he's processed more. He's had more sewn into him, even more trauma sewn into him. And Haidt and a couple others helped me realize there's a lot more coming at him than came at you. And so anything you're feeling is like put on crack for them. Right? It's happening like that. And that's creating burnout in younger and younger people. Wow. And so it just caused me to go, Jesus, forgive me. I'm sorry. I was wrong. That was the wrong attitude to have. So you're right, but we're all guilty of it.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so hard. I think I feel for those individuals, and it's like we've got to. We're in the process of trying to figure out like what is the right way to deal with this. I mean, if you ordain someone to be a pastor in their 20s, I mean, how do you sustain that till you're in your 60s?
Right.
So, like we don't know yet. And I think. Is there some feedback that's being given to a generation that is accurate? 100%.
Yeah.
Like I would say 100%. I think in general, you can cut this from the podcast if you don't like it, but I think our generation, I would say mine, millennials, kind of the tail end, and then Gen Z. There's like I say to them all the time, I'm not shocked that the church is sleepy. We idolize rest. I mean, I definitely think a boomer would outwork you like every day and twice on Sunday. I mean, I think I think if we watched you work, I think to watch someone really work like 40 hours, I think would be mind blowing. I do think that. And I think, and if a generation wants to be taken seriously, then you got to own your flaws.
That's right. That's right.
And in the church in particular, it's like, man, people just like, they want to do this. They're like, man, I want to work in the church. I want to speak once a month, and I kind of want to be able to recycle it, every 3 months. And I want to do a podcast, and I want to have huge honorariums. And I'm like, no, no, that's just not how that's going to work. No. So there are some legitimate things to work through there.
Yeah.
But I mean, dude, everybody's got to come to the table humbly, with some open hands. And I think, the Lord's doing great things.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to take just a quick moment, because I think it'd be irresponsible of me not to, let's pretend somebody is either a student pastor or a volunteer, one or the other. They're in their local church. And the pastor's going, somebody needs to, we got some college students in our church. They don't have a huge budget. They care deeply. They want to get it right. What advice would you give them?
I had someone ask this question today. What do you do if someone like recognizes a need, but they're not really supporting what needs to happen? And I was like, all you need is a room. All you need is a room. If you can get a room, then there's room for God to do incredible things in that. Whether you open up the room in your own home or, it would be ideal if the church would open up a room where you can gather with those individuals. I think, a lot of people, they don't forsake the gathering of the saints, and everybody's like, yeah, we understand, like, gathering together is great, but they do forsake the mission. And so I'm like, hey, it's not just that we like show up, it's that we like, we're moving on mission together. And so I think there's a generation, like, I don't think there's ever been a generation. This might be a really terrible overgeneralization, which would make me a hypocrite. How you doing? But I think if Jesus gathers 12 individuals and is able to change the world with it, I think we are more primed for that type of impact to come with that little budget right now than any other in a long, long time. I won't say ever. Everybody is like, the world is the West in particular, I mean, like the UK for sure is post-Christian. America's becoming more post-Christian, that we're almost pre-Christian again. And it's like people are like ready to just be like, hey, what is the ultimate answer here that we need to be aiming for? Because people have, church, the word deconstruction is like a real loaded term, but now people are like deconstructing their own identities. Like they're realizing more books are coming out about, we are more anxious from being on our phones. You actually can't transition your sexuality and everything is just like amazing from that point moving forward. Like there's all of these like statistics that are now coming out on false ideologies that were like, maybe I should try church again. Yeah. And if you can get a room and you can gather people together and say, we are going to move through John together and we are going to pray that God would do incredible things. And it's not just going to be one individual coming to the table saying, we're going to do what I want to do, but it is a collaborative effort to say, this is the vision that I feel like God has for this group in our church, in our city. Does anybody else agree? Then you've not only got their buy-in to the vision, but you also are going to have them bring people along and say, hey, there's something incredible that's going on here. And so I'd be like, if you can get a room, God's got room to do something great. I
love that. And there's a really encouraging thing you're saying there, and I want to make sure everybody's hearing it, and that is, don't see your lack of resources as something working against you, but actually see it as something that's working for you. You said we're more primed right now for a handful of people with an open Bible sitting in a circle to have a real encounter with God that can be contagious than maybe we've seen in our lifetime.
I like what you said.
In that case, those okay, I don't have all the bells and the whistles and the best band and the T-shirt and you're going no. That's actually advantageous for you right now.
Yeah, I think just because God gave you a dream and you feel like you don't have the resources doesn't mean that the dream is not real. It just means that you're going to have to really depend on Him to make it happen. So I think lack of resources creates reliance. We've heard that before. And I had the dream for Key, but I was not where I needed to be yet. I had a dream for Key, and I was like a year and a half into my marriage at my first church plant. I wasn't in the city where it was supposed to happen. The next city I was in wasn't where it was supposed to happen. It needed to be here, but there were some things that needed to happen in Luke before that could actually take place. And so, but even when we started, I was like, I think the budget I had, you would show up at our church and be like, man, they don't lack anything. And it's like, we do not have a big budget. And at the time, I think I was given like $12,000 for the year for our young adult ministry. And even now, the budget for our young adult ministry is like $25,000 maybe.
Wow.
Like, not including a personnel staff member over it. Like, it's just like, we don't have a lot that we're doing with that. It's just like, do what you can with what you got. Like, God will meet you in that for sure. It's the loaves and fish.
I want to do this also because I am so grateful for what you're doing, Luke. Because we do have a lot of students that do the Disney college program. We do have a lot of students that come here for college. I ran into one this past week who was like, "Hey, I went through SLU," and she was at Disney. My family was getting on the tram thing to go back to our car, and we're getting on the tram, and she literally grabs my arm and she goes, "Oh, you prayed for me at SLU 301 when I graduated." And I was like, what?
Crazy.
And it's just this family reunion. So we do have a lot of students. So if a student's coming to Orlando, college students coming to Orlando, young adults coming to Orlando, it's LifeBridge Church. But how would they get in contact with Key? How would they get involved with that?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow it online. It's at Key Nights, at QUAY Nights. And you can also reach out via our church website, LifeBridge Church, and get into contact with Pastor Tevin, who's awesome. Tevin Lukas is now leading that ministry, and it was an absolute joy to hand that over to him. And he's done amazing. He's done even more than I could have with it. I'm thankful for him. So reach out to him online too. Would be an easy way to connect. But I would love to get anybody that wants to be connected in there. Yeah.
In fact, you and I were walking in the hall here, and one of our former SLU students, she was like, "Hey, Pastor Luke." Yeah. Just my heart just went,
crazy.
Oh.
Yeah.
And she goes, "I've been at the church now a year." And I was just like, praise the Lord. That's just amazing.
Oh,
so I hope there's a lot more that are able to plug in if you're coming to Orlando. Hey, guys, this has been a great conversation. And I hope that you'll share it with somebody that might need it or maybe need some encouragement. There's some gold nuggets in what Pastor Luke's been sharing with us, both about building culture, next-gen ministry, and then this great shot in the arm of encouragement for those who are going, I got this assignment, but I just don't know what to do with it all. So I hope you'll not only listen, but maybe share this with somebody. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Until we meet again, wander well and shine like stars.